This day is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, December 1848, President James K. Polk delivered his annual end-of-year message to Congress, and in it spent a good amount of time talking about the gold that had been discovered in California earlier that year. Among his remarks, he said, quote, "The accounts of the abundance of gold in that territory are of such an extraordinary character as would scarcely command belief were they not corroborated by the authentic reports of officers in the public service who have visited the mineral district." Basically, Polk is saying, yeah, all those rumors are true. There is gold in them there hills. Reports indicate that by the time Polk had finished his sentences, half the members of Congress had grabbed a bucket and a pickaxe and sprinted out of the room and headed for the hills to pan for gold. That part is not true, but it's not that far from true because the way that people were behaving in 1848 was kind of wild. And Polk's remarks do signal a shift from 1848, where it really was a sort of scattershot gold rush full of rumor and speculation, to all of a sudden the government giving its official stamp of approval, taking things in 1849 to a whole new level. So let's talk about this sort of pivot point from gold fever to a real institutional investment in many ways into the gold in California. Here to discuss, as always, Nicole Hammer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hey there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
I want to talk about Polk's remarks because, I mean, part of it is just like, well, here's the president blowing up our spot. Like, come on, buddy. But it really is this interesting pivot point between 1848 and 1849, where 1848 is the year of like fever, and then 1849, largely predicated on this remark, is where it's like you start to really see the like industry around gold really kind of click into place. But let's linger in the kind of wild and crazy days of 1848 first. So what do we know about how gold is first discovered, and how kind of crazy does the speculation get?
Yeah. Well, first we should say that like California was Mexico first. So when the Mexican-American War ends, part of the concession, part of the agreement with this Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is that California will now become a part of the United States. And as soon as that treaty is signed, like 2 weeks later, gold is found. And it's like, oh, sex for you, Mexico. Like, because after that, I mean, people really are trying to get to the state as quick as they possibly can. And it becomes there's no other sort of way to explain the kind of rush to movement that people have, other than maybe the sort of the Louisiana Purchase. I think of, the United States doubling in size. There's a huge territory in California that is acquired by the United States, and that gold rush starts, and it doesn't really stop until almost all of the gold is practically depleted.
I mean, madness is kind of the word. Right?
Yeah, madness.
People do go a little nuts, and you see a kind of microcosm of what will happen when gold is discovered. So gold is discovered at this sawmill that's located out in a remote part of the Sierra Nevada. And the owner of the mill is like, hey, don't tell anyone because we have workers here. We're trying to get the sawmill up and running. We want to make sure that our work gets completed. And of course, they immediately tell people because there's gold. And all of the workers abandon the mill and go to try to make their fortunes in the ground. And the sawmill goes bankrupt. And that kind of both the madness or the fervor that seizes the workers, and also the effect on the other industries that were trying to get off the ground at the time. All of that is going to be replicated on a much larger scale as news starts to get out about gold.
The whiplash is kind of remarkable. And that feels like the entire vibe of that year is just all of a sudden a rumor would spread. And we'll talk about how sometimes the rumors were not true or, intentionally not true and nefarious. But then all of a sudden, it's the gold rush. Entire towns would just kind of clear out as people ran into the hills.
And in a short amount of time. I mean, you think about like within 3 years, 1848, you've got 5,000 miners 3 years later, you have 125,000 miners in the area. I mean, that's a city. A huge city is popping up almost overnight.
Yeah, but still small enough. Like San Francisco at this point, right, is a very small town. Still small enough in those early days where someone can walk down the street. There's a story, maybe apocryphal, but this guy, Sam Brennan, walked down Montgomery Street, one of the central streets in San Francisco, with a bottle containing gold flakes, shouting, "There's gold in the American River. Look, there's gold in the American River." And then like the town clears out. And like the next day, there's just like no one in town because everyone is in the hills prospecting.
Right. And the military governor of California, because of course it's not a state yet, it's just become a territory of the United States, is writing up a report on the impact of this discovery of gold. And he talks about how, fields that had been planted were not harvested, and cows and horses that were out there were being left to just feed for themselves, that farms lay idle, that all of these mills lay idle because everyone was going to go find their fortune in gold. And Jody, you mentioned that San Francisco had about 1,000 people at this point in time. By the winter of 1849, so in just about the space of a year, there are 25,000 people living in San Francisco. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 25 times the number that had been there before. So there's no infrastructure for this. And it is just kind of a free-for-all at that point.
Hey, it's Jody, and as you likely know, it is the Radiotopia fundraiser right now, and more specifically, it is nearing the end of the Radiotopia fundraiser. Now, before you throw confetti in the air to celebrate, I do have to say there is still time for those of you who have not supported to become members of Radiotopia. And we have a goal of 2,024 donors before the end of the year. We are just about halfway there, so some work to do. If you are one of those hang around and see kind of people, now is the time. If you're listening to this sentence that I'm speaking right now, take a moment to think about what that means. It means you're the kind of person who likes this show enough that you are still listening to a fundraiser pitch let me look at my watch here, about 27 seconds into this thing. That probably means you like this show and you like the work that I and NIki and Kellie, not to mention Jacob and Brittany and Kala, do. By supporting, you're helping us make exactly the show we want, but also casting a vote for independent media, which needs all of the help it can get right now. $20, $5 a month, $10 a month, $7,000 a month. Figured I'd throw that out there just in case. Anything you can do to go from listener to supporter at whatever level works for you, it means so much. And as a token of our gratitude, when you donate today, you will also get access to the list of our favorite things curated by me and all of the producers at Radiotopia. It is actually a pretty incredible collection of recommendations. So head on over to radiotopia.fm/donate to donate today. Write a little note saying you're supporting this day. Once again, that's radiotopia.fm/donate. And thank you so much.
We want to tell you about another podcast from PRX called Monumental. This podcast explores questions about the past, present, and future of U.S. monuments, uncovering the stories about what and who is important, as well as the stories that have been left out. Join host Ashley Seaford across the country with their team of journalists. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
This day is brought to you by Mint Mobile. Here's a resolution as we end one year and start a new one. Stop paying so much for your monthly wireless plan. Seriously, have you looked at your bill lately? I have. And after months and months of thinking to myself, man, this feels really high, I finally gave Mint Mobile a shot. Their premium wireless plans start at $15 a month. Just to be clear, I am saying 15. The secret is that they do it all online. So they're not setting up retail stores or salespeople or anything. They are just laser focused on taking a little bit of your money and giving you great wireless service in return. I switched from one of the big three providers. It was a super easy process, and I was up and running. High-speed data, unlimited talk and text, 5G, all that stuff. But now, when I get my wireless bill, I don't want to throw my phone out the window. So turn a new leaf heading into the new year. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/thisday. That's mintmobile.com/thisday. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/thisday. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower than 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, so let's turn the page now because all of this is sort of happening early in spring, summer of 1848. A lot of people are kind of calling for government support, right? And saying, hey, the federal government needs to come, like things are going a little crazy here. Can you come in? And part of that is sort of like validating, as Polk says in his speech. So when Polk gives this speech and says, okay, look, we've seen it. This isn't just rumor and speculation. We have seen it. Trusted sources have seen it. It takes things to the next level. And kind of all the things we've been describing just sort of go into like hyper mode and into sharper relief. So where do we want to start? I mean, we've talked a little bit about the population influx. Those are people coming from other parts of the country, flooding in. I mean, what's the economic impact? What else?
I feel like, for me, the real money to be made is actually not in the gold. The real money to be made is in being one of those stores or suppliers or boarding houses or sort of necessity that people need in order to survive while they're out there. So people that open up boarding houses make money hand over fist. People that are selling, the mining supplies become huge, millionaires, if you will. The people that are selling anything that you would need to support that industry, and they do need a lot.
Hotel
owners. That is actually where the real money is to be made, and there are a lot of people that make out like gangbusters because of that.
Including names that you know, right? This is where Levi Strauss first sort of invents the riveted jeans and starts selling them to miners, and of course he has a legendary multi-billion-dollar company based off of that. Wells Fargo comes out of this as one of the gold buying banks. So not only do you have the creation of these kind of legacy institutions and companies in the United States, this is also kind of how California becomes a state, because you have to have a certain amount of population in order to apply for statehood. And California gets this real influx of white Americans. And California had, until that point, been, as Kellie said at the beginning, Mexico. And so it was largely populated by Mexicans. And that it is going to be essentially Americanized over the course of a very brief amount of time, because you have all of these people coming in, and it's a purposeful policy, right? So California imposes a set of rules that says foreign miners, and by that they mean Mexican, Chinese miners, aren't allowed to mine here, right? And that's a combination of rules and a combination of, let's say, pressure put upon them by other miners to make sure that the people who mostly gain from this gold rush are white Americans.
Yeah. And obviously, Native Americans are crowded out here, and Native California communities are crowded out here as settlers move in. And H.W. Brands, the historian, has talked about kind of 1848 was the watershed moment that kind of, as he put it, molded the country and transformed the wilderness. And of course, it's not just the physical wilderness that gets transformed, but it's all the people who had lived there for centuries and centuries who kind of get pushed to the side. Kellie, your point about all the sort of ancillary industries being the most stable is so well taken. And it makes me think about, I think I've mentioned on this show, like my favorite show basically of all time, maybe second only to The Wire, is that show Deadwood, which I really, really love. Oh. And one of the things about Deadwood that I really appreciate is it kind of mostly cares about the sort of other industries in the town. There actually aren't that many scenes of people panning for gold, but there is a ton about, like, the protagonist of the show makes his fortune selling supplies, and there's the saloon owners and so forth. But it makes me realize that, like, whether you find gold or not, you're still buying an axe, you're still buying a panning equipment. And so that's actually, so that's actually the most stable thing, because it doesn't actually matter whether there's gold in there in the hills. You're still going to sell someone the equipment. But,
I think about Mary Ellen Pleasant, who I write about in my book. She was, some people speculate she was the first Black woman millionaire. I don't know if she was a millionaire, but she was very wealthy. She was very, very wealthy. And she made her money opening boarding houses and restaurants and trading in secrets. She would get sort of the intel on all these wealthy men and then use sort of bribery as her business.
Right.
And she became known as like sort of the Queen of San Francisco. I mean, that was her dig.
Yeah. Obviously, there's that sort of seedier side or more entrepreneurial side, if you want to be generous about it. But, I love some of the names of some of the gangs that pop up. There's the Hounds Gang and the Sydney Ducks, which are apparently a bunch of ex-convicts from Australia who showed up in San Francisco on what was known as the Barbary Coast, which is part of San Francisco. But they don't name them like they used to. But the Hounds Gang and the Sydney Ducks. We got to
get back to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other big thing that happens relatively quickly is that, we have this image of the gold rush as all of these independent entrepreneurial people rushing out to make their fortunes. But pretty quickly it becomes like corporations and businesses, right? The people become wage laborers for these businesses out there digging gold. And this is one of the sort of persistent myths about the West, is that it's this very individual, independent space. But this is what happens, right? Like everybody becomes wage laborers, including like cowboys and miners. Like they're working for companies and they don't have the kind of independence that they're often storied to have. And the gold rush is such a good example of this because it's, by 1855 or by the early 1850s, you have miners who are working for companies instead of out there sort of like trying to make their own fortunes.
Right. Well, maybe we should end on this note because I am struck by the sort of tension or just the sort of relationship between the speed at which this happened, but then the larger project that Polk himself had talked about, a couple years earlier, he'd used the phrase manifest destiny and talked about the sort of westward push. And so you have this kind of long-term vision of what the West will be and how America will expand and connect the coasts and so forth. And then you have this accelerant and this sort of crazy moment that, I think is largely by happenstance comes along, but they're related projects for sure, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just this sort of like random frenzy. It happens to tie right into a very concerted longer term vision.
Yeah. And I think California becomes the new East Coast, or, it becomes sort of that geographical space where the United States is ending, but also beginning. Like when you think of the East Coast and the West Coast, these are the two sort of like pillars that hold up a lot of the industry, the railroads, the banking, the finance, the politics of it all. The fact that it becomes a free state is also a part of that as well. People wanting to have free labor so that they can, maintain part of the economics of the state. Like there's so much also about the fact that this is such a multicultural space. You have the Chinese, you have Native Americans, you have Mexicans, you have Black people out there, you have Aussies, as you just said, like everyone is flocking to this space and they have to navigate like what this new world is going to look like or what this region is going to look like. And in some cases, there's a lot of promise to that. And in other cases, you see a lot of peril because you see the same sort of systems of exploitation and racism sort of raising its ugly head.
You also see an interesting sort of change in the vision of Manifest Destiny, because Manifest Destiny, if you've seen paintings and allegories about it, is about the progress of Eastern civilization marching steadily to the West. But with the California Gold Rush, all of a sudden, you have like the strong population center on the West Coast that then like encourages the building of the transcontinental telegraph system and the transcontinental railroad, that the country is suddenly knitted together much more quickly. But then it's about filling in the middle as opposed to just sort of like steadily marching to the West. And that's what the process of sort of bringing this nation together is going to look like, is coming at it from both sides.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's leave it there. Some really interesting little moments and a kind of larger picture of what the gold rush meant. But Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Radiotopia.